You are listening to Over and Back's Basketball Mysteries of the 1970s. Today's mystery is, why were there so many playoff upsets? All right, welcome back to Over and Back. I'm Jason, and with me as usual is Rich, and we are talking about the 1970s, of course, and it is time for extreme parity in both leagues, but in particular the NBA.
It's just nuts. I mean, some of the numbers and some of the all-time, it's just staggering how much parity there was in the NBA and the ABA and just in general in this 1970s. It's just crazy.
Yeah. So there are 8 different NBA champs in the 70s, and to put that in perspective, the 80s have 4, the 90s have 4, the 2000s have 5, the 2010s actually have 6 so far in 7 years. We're going to look into this further and find that I think that the 2010s actually have more parity than I think is generally thought about.
Considering superstars are ruining the league by coming together to congregate on teams and steal the NBA. Yeah, it's kind of funny how it's still not really.
At least when it comes to championships and playoff upsets, we're still there is a decent amount of parity, and there's some circumstances behind that, injuries or what have you. But it's interesting anyway. ABA, there were 4 champs in 7 seasons, so there were. The Pacers won back-to-back titles in 72 and 73. There were no back-to-back champs between 70 and 1988 when the Lakers finally won their back-to-back. So there's very much we've talked about before, there's very much a lack of dynasty. The difference between the win totals of the best team and the win totals of the worst team very much compressed during this time. Like, for example, in the 73 season, the best team had 68 wins. There was the Celtics. The worst team had 9 wins, the 76ers. And 7 out of the 17 teams in the league had between 30 and 50 wins. And that rate increased dramatically. In the 1977 merger season, the best team in the league had 53 wins. The worst team had 22, and 20 out of the 22 teams had between 30 and 50 wins. And that trend would continue for another couple of years. So from 74 through 79, those numbers were fairly similar. The highest win total during that time was 60. The lowest win total during that time was 22. So, no teams having any wins in the teams and almost no teams having wins, 60 plus during that time is really interesting. 80 comes along, Magic and Bird join the league, some added superstar power, and then that disparity kind of jumps up again, as the rest of the decade goes along. But there is that really interesting, blip of 5 or 6 years where there's real extreme parity in the league. And a lot of it is the merger and the influx of talent in the merger, but that's not the complete explanation because 74 through 76 is very much that way as well.
Right. Yeah. So there's more at hand than just simply merging the 2 leagues and adding a bunch of new talent or adding a bunch of new teams. Like there's something else cooking there to say the least.
Yeah, and I think some of that can be explained by the expansion of the late 60s and early 70s, that those expansion drafts and ABA competition helped dilute the league in the late 60s and early 70s. So as those years kind of progress, it's harder to, if you're a good team or a great team, it's harder to get an influx of really good players, and it's harder, if you're a middling team to, get a great player too. It's only really, the draft is now only really helping a smaller number of teams, unless you get lucky with a late round steal. The Lakers and the Knicks of the early 70s, who were kind of the exceptional teams before this period of parity starts, they were built largely before this expansion ABA diluted the draft pool. So, their superstars were all guys who came from the early 60s and such. And the Knicks were built, in mid-60s drafts that happened largely before expansion began. The Bucks are kind of an exception to that because they lucked into getting Kareem, who was
right, and that's an all you need, really.
Yeah, who's the one exception, and because they got Kareem, they got Oscar, that superstar, even though he was aging, still a superstar level player. So those were kind of like the 3 teams who sort of bucked that trend, at least in the early part of the decade. And then once those teams age, and once Kareem leaves and goes to the Lakers, a diluted Lakers team, there's not really a super team to fill that vacuum until the 80 season or so.
Yeah, which is interesting. There's a few different theories, and we're going to talk about a few here. One part of me initially, and again, I haven't done like a ton of research on this, and this is something I really think that would be cool to kind of dig into again, and maybe for a future episode we really go deep into it and kind of try to investigate it even a little bit more than we're going to do here. But there's there's something to be said for free agent movement as well. And this is the first decade where we really kind of notice a lot of players deciding that they control where they want to go and they kind of do this. So that I think plays a little bit of a part in it, but not enough to make it as big of a parody as there is. And we're going to talk about a few other things as well that could have done it. I don't know if it's any one of these things or just a confluence of all of them, you know?
Yeah. And I think the competition's an issue too, I think, because obviously any major free agent jump would require gutting a new team. You know, if Golden State, if competition still existed, Golden State signed Durant now, that probably would have caused the Warriors to have to give the Thunder Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, or possibly both. I mean, that he might be valued in that level. And you know, you look at how the Clippers were gutted when they signed Walton in '79, for instance. They lost Kermit Washington and Kevin Kuzma, and, you know, some good players. So you know, that obviously prevents building of super teams, like, you know, at that time. That just leads to issues that and competition ends after 80 or 81. So that makes a difference. The ABA dispersal draft as well, you know, the merger that evens up some teams. You know, Chicago, who's not very good, gets Artis Gilmore, and suddenly they're pretty good. You think, you know, things like that go on. So so, you know, we're going to kind of look here at the biggest 7-game upsets, because so many of them happen during the 70s. It's really interesting to see of that level how many of them are really from this. We kind of looked at a period from 70 to 81, because there's a couple in 81 that I think spiritually sort of still fit in with the 70s that I think are interesting.
Yeah, so in terms of biggest 7-game upsets, in terms of records, this is the win differential between the two teams. 1975, this is your all-time. St. Louis, the Spirits over the Nets as a 26 win differential. Now we go to the 2007, the Warriors over the Mavs. It's a 25 win difference. Then we go into a glut of 70s. 1972, the Nets over the Colonels, 24 win difference. 1975, the Pacers over the Nuggets, 20 win difference. 1976, the Suns over the Warriors, 17 win difference. And then, as you mentioned, 1981, kind of the spiritual 70s. The Kings over the Suns, a 17 win difference. And then 2016, of course, this past season, the Cavs over the Warriors, 16 win difference, which is tied with a few others as well. But we thought worthy of noting. But yeah, you look at that right there, and that's, you know, it's not necessarily that these teams are, you know, there's a big win difference. You know, we talked about the, you know, teams are a lot more even or whatever. Well, these are teams that are like, you know, the Nets are better than the Spirits. They have 26 more wins than them, but the Spirits still win. Like, that's something that we don't really get as much in today's NBA, where we sort of take it for granted that, you know, the team that's got the more wins is probably the better team and they're going to win. But the 70s, it wasn't that. I mean, there's huge examples right there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, technically 6 if you had the 81, that are just huge differences in wins, and they're just giant upsets that have happened, you know, in the 70s. If you go to SRS as well, the biggest upsets in terms of SRS ever, of the top 19, 10 are from 1971 to 1981, which is another just real telling number about just how crazy the upsets were. 75, again, the Spirits over the Nets, 10.6. This is in terms of the difference in SRS. 1972, the Nets over the Colonels. We mentioned that one before, 7.78. 2007, the Warriors over the Mavs, which we mentioned before, 7.28. The Hawks over the Magic, 2011. There you go, 2.06 for the Hawks. 1976, the Suns over the Warriors, 5.63. 1981, again, the Kings over the Suns, 5.32. And then, of course, 2016, Cavs or Warriors, 4.93. But again, we see 1, 2, you know, 3, 4 of those that we mentioned being in the 70s, and again, of that top 19, 10 of the biggest differences of SRS are from 1971 to 1981. So it's just a really telling weird era for that. It's odd. And then you're probably wondering, you know, well, how does that stack up with other decades or whatever? So the way we did this is, you know, a 4 difference in SRS, and then an 11 win difference in wins, just to kind of give us an idea of.
It's either or, not necessarily both.
Yeah, right. And so, yes, they're mildly arbitrary, but hey, go with us. It's our podcast. We can do whatever we want. So 1970 and 1981, 15 of those upsets happened in those. So we're looking at 15. Okay, how does that compare? In the past 30 years, we can only find 14 that match that. Eight of them are since 2010. So again, more to your credit that we are seeing actually a lot more parity than a lot of people think with today's NBA. But yeah, again, you know, 15 in that one decade, and then 14 ever since then. Here's the ever since thens: the Rockets Lakers 86, Rockets Suns 95, Rockets Spurs 95, Rockets Magic 95. Good job, Rockets. Lakers Spurs 2001, Warriors Mavs 07, Celtics Cavs 2010, Spurs Grizzlies 11, Hawks Magic 11, Sixers Bulls 2012, Grizzlies Thunder 13, Nets Raptors 2014, and then two from this last past years: Thunder Spurs 2016 and Cavs Warriors in 2016. But again, like it's undeniable that there were just more upsets in the 70s than any other decade prior, or almost since the NBA. Since that, there's been only 14, 15 in that one decade. So yeah, it's an undeniable fact that there were just more upsets.
Yes, and a lot of the ones over the past 7-8 years are usually often explained by an injury. So
Sixers Bulls, Derrick Rose goes out. There's plenty of that. I think Celtics Cavs, wasn't that Garnett got hurt in that series? There's so many of these that you look at, and true upsets. Of course, you got the Warriors Mavs in 07, but a lot of these other ones, like you said, are just like a lot. The Grizzlies Thunder 2013, another injury riddled one. So yeah, there's so many of those that kind of pop up.
Absolutely. So looking at the 70s upsets in more detail. The first one, the 1970 Western Division Finals, the LA Stars beat the Denver Rockets. The Stars had 43 wins. The Rockets had 51 wins. The Stars had Matt Calvin, also Willie Wise, and the Nuggets had Spencer Haywood, who averaged 37 points during the series, Larry Jones, and Byron Beck. And we talked about Haywood's season before, but led the entire league in scoring and rebounding, was ABA MVP and Rookie of the Year. The Stars were able to, they acquired a shot blocking center named Craig Raymond over the midseason. He was a really key influence in this upset. The Stars lost game 1 in overtime in Denver, but then won the next 4, including the final game of the series, which was nationally televised from Denver on CBS. And the Stars' Merv Jackson hit a clutch baseline jumper over Larry Jones with 16 seconds left to give the Stars a 109-107 lead. The Rockets then had a chance to tie, but Jeff Congdon's mid-range jumper clanged off the rim, and Raymond got the rebound, and the Stars had their 25th victory in the last 32 games. Talked a little bit about this during the Utah Stars podcast. This was right before the Stars would make the finals and then lose in the finals in the series, then move to Utah the next year and win the championship for Zelmo. But I didn't point out necessarily what a big upset this was during this time, and it fit our criteria of there was a more than 4 SRS difference between the Rockets and the Stars that season.
Yeah, well, now I'll get 1971. The Baltimore Bullets over the New York Knicks. The Bullets had a .91 SRS, 42 wins. The Knicks had 5.05 SRS and 52 wins. The Knicks had, of course, Walt Frazier, Dick Barnett, David DeBusschere, Willis Reed, Bill Bradley, and Cazzie Russell, so kind of a classic Knicks team there. The Bullets had Earl Monroe, Jack Marin, Fred Carter, Wes Unseld. They also had Kevin Lowry and Gus Johnson. This is the third year in a row that these teams would meet. The Knicks had swept the Bullets in 1969, despite Baltimore having the best record in the league, and then won a 7-game series in 1970. So in this series, the home team won the first 4 games. The Knicks grinded out a 89-84 win in Game 5 at Madison Square Garden. The Bullets got the equalizer in Game 6 at the Boston Civics, or the Baltimore Civics, taking down a 113-96 win behind 27 points from Earl Monroe. And then the 7th game was played in New York. Monroe outscored Clyde Frazier 26-13. Marin outscored Bradley 20-13, but it was Fred Carter's decisive jump shot with just over 1 minute remaining that gave Baltimore the game and the series. The Bullets then shocked the Knicks 93-91 to punch their ticket to the NBA Finals for the first time in their franchise's history. Yes,
and Monroe managed to average 24.4 points per game in the series. It was really a great series for them, but it was only the Knicks and the Bullets won. They played 6 series in a row. 6 years in a row they met in the playoffs, and this would be the Bullets' only win, unfortunately, for them. But they were able. Kevin Lockery said that this was it was really the one of the greatest playoff series for him in his career, basically like winning the championship, because Baltimore were always losing to New York at the time. They couldn't beat the Knicks, the Colts couldn't beat the Jets, the Orioles couldn't defeat the Mets, and that was sort of their championship. And then Baltimore in 71 actually did win championships. The Orioles won the World Series, the Colts won the Super Bowl. And the Bulls did go to the NBA Finals, but then they ended up getting swept by the Bucks in 4 games. So didn't quite work out for them all the way, but still a pretty good run for them.
Not bad for Baltimore. They have not had a lot of that since then.
Not so much. Yeah. The Bullets Baltimore hasn't. The Bullets franchise had a nice.
The Bullets are fine.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, they had a nice little run at the end of the 70s, but then they haven't had so much, unfortunately.
Right, and the Orioles had a great little 70s, but since then not so much. And the Baltimore Colts, have not had a very good run in Baltimore because they're the Indianapolis Colts, and they have a lot of success in Indianapolis, but not so much in Baltimore when their team ran away overnight in a truck. So
they got the Ravens though, so
right, that's true. Yeah, no, that's right. I forget they won a few. They won what, 2 titles with the Ravens?
It's a football question. I don't know.
Yeah, so
I don't know why you're asking me about football.
You and I do. Yes, you and I are huge football aficionados. I had to ask. I honestly have no idea. I believe it's 2, but
that sounds right. Yeah.
That's not our strong suit, so that will not be launching from the Over and Back podcast family. The football podcast will not be happening. Offsides. What would be the kitschy name we would have?
We'll have to table that one. We'll have to figure that one out.
All right.
If anyone wants to join the over
onside kick or something like that, or something stupid like that, probably.
So next we have the Eastern Division semifinals. The New York Nets, 44 wins, a .21 SRS over the Kentucky Colonels, 68 wins, and a 7.9 SRS. In 1972, the Nets winning that series 4-2. Really, this kind of came completely out of nowhere. The Nets had Rick Barry, so they had a superstar. It was his second year there. He had actually stayed healthy the entire season for the first time, averaged 31.5 points per game, which is second in the ABA, but the team was only slightly better. They won 4 more games that season. They were 44-0 that season. The Colonels were juggernaut. This was Artis Gilmore's rookie year. Louis Dampier was still going strong. Dan Issel was in his second year. The Nets had Bill Melchioni, who was a pretty good guard but was aging a little bit. Billy Pultz, who was a solid center. And John Roach, who had been a 3-time All-American in South Carolina and would actually be really important in this series because Rick Barry would get strep throat, and then Roach would step up and come through in a huge Game 4, scoring 32 points and somehow willing a team that was undermanned to be able to beat Issel and Gilmore and the Colonels. Quite an impressive effort. Really just they completely discarded what they usually did and just played a bunch of pick and roll and give and go, and Roach just did a bunch of between the legs, behind the back dribbles. They sort of compare him. There's an SI article just basically comparing him to they call it a late model Pete Maravich haircut flopping, and his pointy pale black Irish face pursed in a boyish mirror of his boldness and backing Kentucky into a desperate corner. So they had a way back then in the Sports Illustrated of painting a picture, but before that the Nets were able to take the advantage. Rick Barry had 50 points in the first game, and Kentucky did win Game 3, but it was close. And then after that Game 4, Roach actually in the end by scoring 38 points with he switched a 3-pointer near the end of the clock to lift the fans up out of the Coliseum and into victory. There were 7 seconds left, and Mike Pratt for Kentucky actually hit a 3-pointer, but the referee nullified the basket, saying that Issel had set an illegal moving screen, and then taking the game away, despite the fact that it was, they not usually call it sort of made at the end of the game. So, the Colonels coach, Joel Mullaney, said there was, after one of the defeats, a New York sports writer was nabbed by Louisville police for scuffling with a fan. And then Mullaney said, "They got the wrong man. We're the ones who should have been arrested." So great little quote from Joe. And then the Nets, after that Game 4, the Colonels did win Game 5 at home. But then Game 6, the Nets won in a close one. By then, Rick Barry was back and just were able to overwhelm you could kind of point to the Colonels' inexperience here as with Gilmore and Issel being young, and the Colonels were a team that they would finally win the championship in '75, but they would sort of have these overwhelming regular season teams and have these postseason disappointments until Huey Brown came along and kind of found the right mix.
Absolutely. Oh, by the way, touchback would be the name of our.
Oh yeah, there you go, touchback.
I mean that seems
that would definitely.
So there we go.
Yeah.
So we'll start recording that tomorrow, and we just the episode at the end of the week. So
all right,
it'll be great. Can't wait. Let's break down
yeah. Y.A. Tittle. That's a
yes.
thing.
Yeah. Well,
yeah. Yeah. There you go. Dick Butt Kiss.
Joe Montana.
I know who Joe Montana is.
Right. We're just talking about guys we know. This is great. I like this. Yeah. No research either. I just want you and I just get on here and just talk.
Yeah,
so
we do research for this.
No, this is all off the top of my head.
Okay.
I don't know about you, but yeah, I don't do anything. I don't know about
Fair
you,
enough.
but I just come here and turn the mic on and just. Okay, 1973 Golden State Warriors, 47 wins, 3.12 SRS. Over the Milwaukee Bucks, 60 wins, 7.84 SRS. This is a Milwaukee Bucks team that we've talked about many times during this podcast. A very, very awesome team that got upset by this Warriors team. This was Rick Barry's first year back in the NBA. They also had Jeff Mullins, Cassie Russell, Nate Thurman, but it was Rick Barry in a large way with his team. In the Bucks, of course, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Bob Dandridge, Oscar Robertson, Lucius Allen. So just a really awesome Bucks team that won a ton of games and looked like they were on their way to the NBA Finals, and it just did not work at all. There was possibly some mitigating circumstances. A few months before this, there was a mass murder of Kareem's Islamic teacher's family in Washington, D.C. This was in a townhouse that Kareem had given them. So obviously it was a stressful situation. He was getting protection from authorities, Kareem, because he was kind of worried about his own life as well. But yeah, it was supposed to be Milwaukee series all the way. There was supposed to be another Bucks-Lakers West final. That was what's going to happen. And the Lakers, they were an awesome team this year as well. So it looked like that was in the cards. This is the series we're going to get. We can't wait. The Milwaukee came out and they won game 1 by 20 points. They won game 3 by 20 points as well. The Warriors got kind of lucky in game 2, 195-92. So it looked like, okay, yeah, for the most part, the Bucks are killing them. The Warriors are kind of getting lucky here and there. Game 4, the Warriors win 102-97. Game 5, the Warriors win 100-97. So as you can tell, there's all these really small margins. And then game 6, the Warriors just, 100-86. Just an incredible, display by the Warriors. The Bucks scored just, of course, 86 points. The easiest triumph for the Warriors this entire, series. And yeah, another thing too, that the 68 win Boston Celtics were about to get knocked out of the playoffs too. You're looking at a Bucks team that had toppled the Lakers, they could have been in prime position to win that, title again. And a real key to the series, defensive work of Nate Thurman. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar has mentioned at times, and I believe we mentioned in this series as well, that he was one of the toughest defenders he's ever faced. Kareem shot just 43% in the series and averaged, by his standards, 22.8 points per game. Very disappointing. Oscar Robertson, though, found a little bit of his little fountain of youth. He had 21.2 points per game, but it was clear that the whole idea was let's stop Kareem and let everybody else kill us. And yeah, 22 points for Kareem is stopping him. And then the balanced Warriors, they were led by Barry's 16.5 points per game, but they had 6 players average double figures for that series. So it was really just a situation of kind of a bunch of really good guys coming together and toppling, an all-star team led by one of the greatest ever in Kareem. But yeah, just a really, really cool series to see and just a huge upset, and one that we have mentioned before that, if it goes the other way and Kareem wins that series, then, there's a different idea of maybe, what his all-time stature is or whatever, because this is a team that probably should have won this, and it just didn't happen for one reason or another.
Yeah, and this is the only time that Kareem's team ever lost in a playoff series to a team that did not make the finals.
Oh, interesting. Okay, yeah. All right. Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So of the, I believe 18 times he made the playoffs, 17 times, they either won or they lost in the finals, or they lost to a team that made the finals. So, yeah, so a few that we've kind of gone through before, so we're just going to talk about briefly. The 1973 Eastern Conference Finals, the Knicks beating the Boston Celtics. We discussed this a lot in the Bob Ryan episode about the Celtics. The Knicks had 57 wins and a 6.07 SRS. The Celtics had a 68 wins and 7.3 SRS. So the SRS is fairly close. The wins is a big difference. The Celtics were a little bit overachieving, I think, of a team and weren't quite that good. And but another huge thing is that John Havlicek was hurt during these series. The Celtics were down 3-1. They tried to rally, but they ran out of gas in Game 7. Havlicek did play, but was barely able to move one of his arms to lift it up to be able to play, which obviously hinders his ability to play basketball.
Slightly, yeah.
And then in 74. The NBA Finals, the Boston Celtics over the Milwaukee Bucks. The Celtics won that series in Game 7. We've talked about that in our Kareem episode, and also talked about that in the same Bob Ryan Celtics episode. But basically, the Bucks' depth had been drained by then due to injuries and due to age. Kareem was awesome, but everyone else just around him, wasn't quite able to perform up to the task, and even Kareem sort of struggled with double teams and triple teams in Game 7 as the Celtics changed their strategy to win that series. And an epic Game 6 that with Kareem hitting a game-winning shot, but then Game 7, the Celtics won 102-87. And then 1975, the NBA Finals, the Warriors, Rick Barry again with these playoff upsets, 48 wins for the Warriors, 2.86 SRS, beating the Washington Bullets with 60 wins and a 6.53 SRS. In 75, they swept them, and this is discussed in our Rick Barry episode. But the games were fairly close. The two of them were by 1 point. Game 1 was by 6 points, and Game 3 was by 8 points. So, fairly narrow margin despite the sweep in that series.
Yeah, it's just just another. This Barry guy is just a pain in the ass, isn't he?
Yes,
in more ways than one to a lot of people, still to this day. But yeah, really at his peak, pain in the assness in the 70s. But yeah, just remarkable that he comes up so often in these. It must be the free throws or something. I don't know, but.
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird, but it's I'm sure. Yeah, hit your free throws, and you'll win a lot of playoff upsets.
That's maybe that's his point when he talks to these guys. He goes, hey, look at all these playoff upsets I had. It's all because of the free throws. But another one too, Spirits of St. Louis, 1975. They had 32 wins and a negative 4.02 SRS, which is not good, by the way. But it didn't matter because they beat the New York Nets, who had 58 wins and a 6.58 SRS, which is just insane. A negative 4. What are you doing? But they did it. The Spirits, they had moved from Carolina, of course. They were basically an expansion team. They had Marvin Bad News Barnes, Freddie Louis, Maurice Lucas, Gus Gerard, and Barnes, Lucas, and Gerard were all rookies as well. So, that's a team of like guys that are good or would become good, but we're talking rookie seasons, just really young guys as well. But the Nets themselves, they're the defending champs, which that's one little caveat there, but they're also very young themselves. Julius Erving, Billy Paultz, John Williamson, Larry Keenan. So, you still have Julius, you're the defending champs, but you're still a young team as well. But there's really just no way that they should have lost to this team, especially the Spirits. They lost 18 of 22 to reach 24-48, but won 8 of their last 12 games to sneak into the playoffs in the last second. Yes, and by the way, in case you didn't notice, they had 32 wins, which if you're counting at home, they're below 500. So the Nets... defending champs, and they beat the Spirits 11-0. The average defeat was 19 points throughout the season as well. So it was like there was just no chance that this was going to happen. And believe it or not, it did. New York wins the first game 111-105. St. Louis comes back game 2 115-97. St. Louis then game 3 113-108. St. Louis game 4 189, and then they finish it out in game 5 108-107. Don Adams is a guy that's mentioned a lot as one of the big reasons for this. He was a journeyman forward who was waived in the middle of the season by the Detroit Pistons, and he made a significant contribution to the Spirits team because they signed him for the ABA minimum of $200 per game, which is life-changing money there. He immediately brought an element of toughness and savvy to the team. He was made fun of as an old man. He was fat and balding. He was described as portly, but it didn't matter because he was kind of he was a tough guy. He punched out Swen Nader after he'd thrown down Marvin Barnes, so he kind of gained his little bit of respect from the team. And as well as that, his physical defense, it frustrated Erving throughout the playoffs, and he fit right in with the style of the young Spirits, who had Lucas and Gerard and some other guys who were, tougher guys, but it just really worked that they had this kind of older veteran tough guy to kind of be the man, to really kind of bring it all together. But yeah, it's just incredible of how easy it was. The Spirits, they erased a 9-point deficit with 5 minutes left. They were only down by 1 at the end. Inbound pass went to Erving, who came under intense defensive pressure from Dom Adams, who we mentioned. And then Erving dribbled the ball off his leg and into the backcourt. And that was kind of it for the Nets, which is just an incredible thing. Freddie Louis, he had a 20-foot game winner at the buzzer at the top of the key over Brian Taylor. And Freddie Louis had the Spirits' last 10 points in the game as well. He averaged 26.2 points per game in the 1975 playoffs. playoffs and helped the Spirits stay competitive against the eventual champion Kentucky Colonels in the Eastern Conference Finals as well. So just an incredible run for the Spirits of St. Louis, one that Bob Costas till this day still calls one of the most dramatic moments of his career, because he was the commentator for the Spirits of St. Louis, which many people know that he kind of got to start there. But it was just incredible that they were able to do that, considering where they were the rest of the season. I mean, they were just not a very good team at all, and were able to beat the defending champions in just an unbelievable. In a lot of ways, it reminds me of, I guess, you're not talking about defending champs, but that Nuggets Sonics upset, maybe the Warriors Mavs won in 2007. So just a few of these just incredible upsets of teams that just had probably no business beating the teams that they did beat.
Yeah. But even the Mavs Warriors one, if you look a little bit closely, was at least sort of understandable in terms of the matchup, and then in fact, like the last 20 games of the season, the Mavs had actually not played all that well, and the Warriors had played really, really well. So you could kind of see that one coming. There was really nothing here that you could kind of see coming. But yeah, Barnes just was awesome during this series. He averaged 30.8 points and 14.1 rebounds for the playoffs. He had 37 and 18 in game 2. That was also the same game where Wendell Ladner famously his shoe fell off his foot, and then he famously Freddie Louis was dribbling away from Wendell, and then he was hobbling around in one shoe, and then he just threw it right at his back, hit Freddie in the back, and then Freddie turned around and was about to take a swing at whoever hit him with the shoe, but then he turned and saw it was Wendell, and he just smiled. So good old Wendell Ladner. But so the fact that Barnes was just completely awesome in that series. They just kind of came together. They had some veterans, Lewis, obviously, who was a really key player for the Pacers, who had come over to St. Louis. Also, they had Steve Snapper Jones at the end of his career, Mike Barr and Adams, as we mentioned. They were able to just kind of get that right mix and get hot at the right time, and did pretty well against the Colonels until Freddie Louis injured his ankle. But yeah, it looked like it was going to be like, it looked like they had something, and they were going to build the momentum toward it, and and be this great team, and maybe have the success in St. Louis that would get them into the NBA, and didn't really happen, unfortunately. So,
but the owners were okay. So
yeah, that's true. The owners did fine. So
not for the players, maybe, but the owners were, I think, okay with the deal that they got.
Although, a lot of the players were good successes in the NBA. Right. Obviously, Maurice Lucas was a successful. Marvin Barnes would have been successful if it hadn't been, for all the stuff that he went through. So, most of the players ended up okay, but you're right. Obviously, the owners were the ones who made out for sure. So, Western Division Finals, the Pacers with 45 wins, 1.14 SRS beat the Denver Nuggets, 65 wins, 6.63 SRS in 75. This is the kind of the final run for the Pacers. Most of the older guys are gone now. It's George McGinnis's team. He has 30.6 points per game in this series, just totally destroys everything. Billy Keller, Darnell Hellman are still there, and then Billy Knight and Linnell Moore are both rookies on this team. The Nuggets, Larry Brown has come to coach the team. They have a really deep team. Matt Calvin, who's a terrific guard, Mike Green, Ralph Simpson, another great shooting guard, Byron Beck, who's a good defender and rebounder, Bobby Jones, who would later be a famous great defender, sixth man for the 76ers, and Dave Robish. All those guys scored in double figures, and they were 40-2 at home during the season. A really incredible team. Obviously, Denver has that, known for that home court advantage. And this would be the year before they would actually change the team over with David Thompson and Dan Issel, and famously make the finals and then have some pretty good runs in the 70s. So this is sort of the proto version of that team. And the Pacers were sort of known for some of these playoff upsets in the late part of their run as a dynasty. In 73, they upset a much stronger Stars and Colonels teams, a much better SRS during the season, even though the records were similar. But that was probably a case of a veteran team that probably didn't go that hard in the regular season. Here, I think it was mostly just McGinnis. McGinnis in Game 1 had 39 points, 22 rebounds, 8 assists, 5 steals. Game 3 had 32 points, 21 rebounds, 14 assists. This is all from Remember the ABA, by the way. And in Game 7, he had 40 points, 23 rebounds, 8 assists, and made 3 steals. Scored 10 of Indiana's 14 points, and basically had a key three-pointer with about 4 minutes left to give them some breathing room and allow them to seal the game. But this is honestly a really kind of weird, crazy series. There's the Pacers imported their super mascot Dancing Harry to put a pregame hex on the Nuggets in Game 2, and then the Nuggets responded in Game 6 by hiring Rabada, the Wicked Witch of the West, to put a.
These are real things, by the way. We're not making this up.
No.
You can Google it. There's actual proof. This is a real thing.
Yes,
so.
to put curses on Darnell Hillman and George McGinnis, and cast spells behind the Pacers bench. So, yes, some fun stories. This is a very ABA series for sure.
Absolutely. We'll move on now. Phoenix Suns, 1976 over the Golden State Warriors. The Suns had 42 wins, a .59 SRS. The Warriors had 59 wins and a 6.23 SRS. So take that, Rick Barry. Hit your free throws, damn it.
Finally.
I have no idea if he had his free throws in this series, so don't quote me on that. But the Warriors, of course, had Rick Barry, Phil Smith, Jamal Will, Clifford Ray. The Suns had Paul Westphal, Alvin Adams, Curtis Perry, Garhead. And actually, believe it or not, they were second in SRS in the West and sixth overall. So just a weird year where just nobody was really that great. I mean, the Warriors who were but yeah, .59 is sixth best SRS in the league, which is not great. Just a quick recap of the games. Game 1, the Warriors won 128-103. Suns came back in Game 2, won 108-101. Game 3, the Warriors 99-91. Game 4, high-scoring affair. Phoenix 133-129. So it's kind of back and forth at this point. Golden State 111-95 to kind of take control of the series. And then Game 6, they really shocked the Warriors, winning 105-104. And then Game 7, the big Game 7, Suns 94-86 over the Warriors. It's just an insane game as well. Just an insane upset for the Suns as well, just of how incredible it was. Rick Barry and Ricky Sobers got into a fight and punched each other early in the fourth quarter. Barry only had 6 points in the second half, and he quoted, as only Rick Barry could say, "You can't score when you don't have the ball." Eric, you are correct. With Rick Barry going nearly 30 minutes without a basket, with Smith scoreless for 20, the Warriors insisted on either standing still or flinging the ball around schoolyard style. It was incredible to watch, wasn't it? Phoenix's Keith Erickson said at the end of the Suns win, "The Warriors went away from everything they've done for 2 years, one-on-one, forcing shots, scrambling, fouling, panic. When they started cracking, I knew." So
yeah, and that was the end of a Warriors team that looked like incredibly, like it had all these great young players and looked like it was going to be a team that, could really be a great dynasty for the rest of the decade. And then it all, they would end up trading everyone. They would trade away Jamal Wilkes or lose Jamal Wilkes, Gus Williams, and eventually Robert Parrish, who would join the team soon and then leave the team. And, all those guys, of course, become important parts of great teams over the next few years. So. Oh well.
At least Rick threw everybody under the bus on the way out, so that worked out pretty well.
So a couple more.
He's not wrong though. He's not wrong.
No, he's definitely not wrong. So a couple more series that we talked about are the Bullets and 76ers from 1978. Talked about this on Dr. J's show with Curtis Harris. So we're going to talk more about this series on upcoming Dr. J show with Curtis Harris. But basically, the 76ers were coming off their year as where they'd gone to the finals but lost to the Blazers, and the Bullets were just a 44-win team, but they had good veterans, Alvin Hayes and Wes Unseld. They'd been a very good regular season team a couple years before, so it may have just been sort of a Bullets were the Bullets were not as working as hard during the regular season as they did during the playoffs, or maybe a case of the Sixers still quite not fitting together until they kind of had to change things around in order to really become the great team that they would become in the 80s. But whatever happened, it was, despite the disparity in SRS, the disparity in the quality of the teams may have been exaggerated by that a little bit. But and then next we have the same year the Western Conference Semifinals, the SuperSonics beating the Portland Trailblazers. Talked about this on our Bill Walton show, but basically, Walton this is when he finally suffers his final foot injury. He's gone after game 2, and the Blazers have no answer for him. They start 50-10 at the season. Walton misses most of the regular season, and they go 8-14 the rest of the way. So they were very dependent on Walton, obviously. And once that happened, the Sonics were able to beat them and reach the finals to face the Bullets and have a series that we've talked about on previous shows as well. So.
I'll move on now to the 1981 season, the Kansas City Kings and the Houston Rockets. We'll talk a little bit here about the Kings. They had 40 wins and a negative .49 SRS. First round, they beat the Blazers, who had 45 wins and a .52 SRS. They beat them 2-1. And then in the Western Conference semifinals, they beat the Suns, who had 57 wins and a 4.83 SRS. They beat them in 7 games, 4 games, 2-3 as well. So just a really cool upset for the Kansas City, and they would be going on to face the Rockets, who also found their way here from some upsets as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The Rockets beat the Lakers in the first round. Famously, the defending champions 2-1. Of course, 3-game series, you can't really get much out of that. But the Rockets had 40 wins, a negative .20 SRS. So basically, the Rockets and the Kings both had the same record, but the Kings had a tiebreaker to be the 5th seed, and the Rockets were the 6th seed technically. So, and then they beat the Spurs, who were a 52-win team, 2.18 SRS in 7 games as well. So the Kings upset was more impressive from because the Suns were the number 1 seed and had a stronger SRS, and also the Kings dealt with some injuries to be able to chug along. Scott Wedman and Ernie Grunfeld really stepped up for them in that series. Walter Davis struggled, where for the Rockets, it was Calvin Murphy really stepped up in the series. He had we talked about this Game 7 before, but he had 42 points in Game 7 of that series to beat the Spurs. Moses Malone also stepping up, particularly in Game 5. He had 34 points and 36 in Game 6, even though the Rockets lost that game. And Malone had 28.1 points per game in the series. Murphy had 25.4, and George Gervin had 27.1 for the losing Spurs in that series. So the actual Western Conference Finals with the 6th-seed Rockets versus the 5th-seed Kings. This is during a time in which only 6 teams make the playoffs, not 8 as we're used to. So the bottom 2 teams in that bracket, the actual series itself was kind of a snoozer. The Rockets won 4-1, and there wasn't really that much to it. But the journey to get there was very interesting.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks, everyone, for checking us out. You can find us at hardwoodparoxysm.com. You can check us out on Twitter and Facebook at Over and Back NBA. If you enjoy what you're hearing, enjoy any of our podcasts, but particularly our Basketball Mysteries, the 1970s series, leave us a rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher or wherever you listen to your podcast. And thanks again for listening. Until next time, goodbye.